quicker and faster results.
So we have Arash and Ali today, and oddly enough, it worked out that they used to work together, and then they still work together in some things, but they have similar levels of expertise, but now they've kind of gone into some other type of business, strictly commercial. But I'm going to let each and every one of them to tell you a little bit of what they've done in the past and what they're doing currently. And the whole idea is to really tap into their brain on commercial, what to do, what not to do. And don't be afraid to ask any questions, because I can tell you that these two guys combined, they could fill the whole day just talking about commercial.
What not to do.
What not to do will take one day. What to do is a half hour. So, Ali, you want to go first?
Good morning. So my background, I went to school for computer science, and I decided I didn't want to write code. So I got my real estate license in 2000. I worked for a large commercial real estate firm, CBRE, for 10 years, where I did office leasing, investment sales, industrial leasing across the board. Then I left CBRE because CBRE is kind of catered to doing deals with big players like public companies, and my clientele was more SMEs, so small, medium enterprises. Those big shops are great to learn, and of course, typically their commission split is 50-50. So I made a decision to look for an alternative brand that would carry the same type of brand recognition, but was more favorable on the commission splits. That's where I met Arash, and we joined Royal LePage, I think in 2007. Yeah, with Vivian. We specialized anything commercial, whether it was leasing, sales, development, disposition, acquisition, portfolio optimization. And we did I think what precipitated me to kind of take a different path is we did 2 large deals where we spent basically a year, 18 months on 2 large deals. One was a regional mall and one was a plaza.
That's a portfolio.
Yeah. You have better memory than me. And what happened was we negotiated the transaction. It went conditional on financing. Okay. But we couldn't really navigate that space as well as we'd like to, because what happened was it was conditional on financing, and one of the requirements is, of course, you need to get a clean phase 1 or phase 2. And the fill that they had used to fill the site previously when they built it, they'd done it before the new legislation. So all the fill was contaminated. And we really couldn't navigate that to find an alternative lender that would get comfortable, or couldn't make the current lender comfortable to allow the buyers to wait. So after some soul searching, Arash went to Iran for a while. I did some soul searching, and I decided that I wanted to really also learn the financing side of the business, because I didn't want to be in a similar situation where we spent so much time, and I think negotiation was harder than the financing, but that was something that we couldn't even navigate because I had no knowledge, or I didn't know any know-how.
It was an extremely complex transaction. I mean, just to touch base on that, because many of you guys don't know, and this will actually teach something. When we bought that portfolio for the client, shoppers had a small portion in the shopping center. They wanted to expand. And it was the time when shoppers started bringing food into the store. We had Loblaws right beside shoppers. So Loblaws did not allow shoppers to expand unless they sign a waiver that they're not going to bring any food. That took 6 months to negotiate with Loblaws. It ended up costing the client, the seller, actually $250,000 as a payment to Loblaws just to allow Shoppers Drug Mart to bring 2,500 square feet of food into the store. And after that was done, the new legislation came into as of the, January 1st, 2008 with the new regulation on the environmental. So we had a clean phase 1, phase 2 site condition report that was clean. This was done by the for the bank of ING, which went bankrupt. That's who our client bought this whole deal from. And in 2008, those reports were not valid anymore. We had to go based on the new guideline, and just the whole thing has changed. We couldn't get the financing. The client got sort of scared, he wasn't sure if he really wanted to do the deal, and the issue became the financing, and just the whole thing fell apart.
Are you at liberty, so you lost that deal?
Yeah.
Are you at liberty to disclose roughly the number, the dollar value?
Yeah, the dollar amount was $16 million. We had a commission agreement.
That's in 2007, 2008.
And we had
Which
a 4%.
Today would be what? Would be about 40 million today?
30 million probably.
30 million.
And that was 4% commission, and we doubled the deal. So me and Ali represented the buyer.
So is that why you went to Iran? You spent the money before you?
There was no money.
So did you go back and revisit the?
You spent all of your money.
We spent it, that's right.
No, there was no going back. The purchaser actually ended up spending additional $50,000 on the environmental record of site assessment. And they weren't so sure still if they wanted to do the deal, and no lender was sure if they really want to lend out on the deal because of this. And since this was a portfolio, we decided to even push for one, but the seller said, these two shopping centers are right across each other. If I want to sell, I'll sell them both, or I'll keep them both. So that ended up happening.
That deal died.
That deal died. And after that deal, because we spent so much time on that deal, almost 18 months, and we were so sure that this deal will happen, and after that, basically, we took a different path, me and Ali, and we separated after that deal. We just couldn't handle it.
No, Ali, you went, just to continue a little bit with, you went to an organization as a vice president, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I had an opportunity to take my commercial real estate know-how and apply it at a lending institution. So I'm sure a lot of you know GE Capital, which doesn't exist anymore. But what GE Capital wanted to do was they financed their own equipment. When they sold a washer or a dryer or a fridge or larger equipment, they were the bank where the purchaser could buy it on a lease or a loan. One of the industries that they wanted to get into was when clients, large office users or industrial users move to a new space, they have to usually retrofit the space, and they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars buying furniture, doing leaseholds, buying equipment. And GE provided lending in that space for clients that were moving. So they wanted to leverage my background, knowing where all the moves are happening and the tenants, to get ahead, to meet with the client and offer them alternative financing. Typically, when a client goes to their bank, banks don't like leaseholds. When you're spending money building a wall, doing painting, doing lighting, typically banks don't like that. But GE had found a way, or had appetite at that time, to lend in that space. So I was at GE Capital for 5 years. I got paid basically to get my MBA and go to school and learn the financing business at that time. GE Capital exited the market. I took a package, and I still want to sharpen my skills. So I did a stint about 18 months at a company called Element Financial. Element is the largest asset-based lender, which means, again, leasing, but that includes trucks, trailers, construction equipment, telephone equipment, computers, furniture, et cetera, et cetera. And during my time there, I really learned, yes, buying real estate, you have an asset that you can touch, you can get an appraisal, you can get valuation. But here's the company that's operating. Good example is called a real estate brokerage. What is a real estate brokerage's real assets? Yes, they have good cash flow, they have agents, they have brand recognition. Is there a way to give a value to that so you can go to a bank and get money, get a loan, which is called balance sheet financing? So basically you're trying to obtain money from a piece of paper, showing a good business plan, good track record, good principles, good operators, strong operators. And that's really what I did at Element Financial. And I always maintained my license, always kept in contact with Vivian and Jack and the team, and then there was a time where it was a good fit for me to come back with my experience that I had. At that time, I got my mortgage license, because to do commercial mortgages, you also need to have your license. And I try to differentiate myself again, leverage my real estate background with my financial, that's called acumen now that I have, to be able to underwrite commercial deals. So doing commercial financing is a little bit, well, a lot different than residential mortgages, but it allowed me to offer that higher level of service to clients. Is because of my previous commercial real estate background, I could pick up a lease and be able to look for the key items, to be able to extract the value, or to make a case when I'm going to the bank and say, okay, this building is worth this much, this is how much you can lend against it because of this, because of how much you can carry, the leverage ratio, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of where I play now, commercial finance, commercial mortgages, and Rush and I maintain our relationship. If there's a deal, we're always picking up the phone and talking and bouncing off ideas.
So let me ask this question, because we're all licensed agents here, and when you're involved in a commercial transaction, you're dealing with multi-millionaire, and some of them billionaires as well. So they don't really need the agent to give them any advice. It's not like residential where they ask you, where should I apply for my mortgage? And residential, you normally give them a couple of suggestions. Go to your own bank, or here's a couple mortgage brokers. And then you get involved a little bit, helping them with the application, what have you. But in commercial, they really don't need the real estate agent for financing, because they've got their own accountants and lawyers and banks.
I would disagree with that.
No, but I'm getting to that, because you started by saying that you learned a lot about that first deal for 18 months, that the financing, as sophisticated as they are, they still need some help. And you've actually very eloquently described how you improved your skills and abilities to the point where you're actually, now you're blending both, your skills and abilities as a real estate agent, and also the financing world. And you got the total package here now, so that you can understand the commercial transaction from A to Z. And then just another point, and then I want Arash to comment, or you, is that when you were starting, when you started out, you were doing everything. You were touching everything. And then slowly, I think you guys specialized in a different, specialized in certain types of commercial. See if I'm correct in that as well. I mean, more so Arash, because he remained in sales.
And it was actually when you go to a large commercial firm, they want you to specialize in one segment of the commercial business, because commercial is so vast and there's so many specializations. My specialty was office leasing, and my market was North York West and Vaughan. At that time, there weren't so many towers in Vaughan, so I got bunched with North York West. But every property, I knew the property manager, I knew what the availability was, I knew what the operating costs were, and I typically knew what type of tenants were in there. And I kind of built my database and my skills by specializing in one asset class, in one segment of the market. Once you build that base, then it gets a lot easier to switch, because all the skills that you learn in office leasing, guess what? It applies to industrial leasing.
They're all transferable.
Yeah, because the terms may be a little bit different. Now you have to consider truck level doors, driving doors, clear height, power, et cetera, et cetera. And guess what? Now they're transferable to retail leasing. And leasing is a really good space to play in, because the timelines are typically shorter and you can make quick commission. Same with residential. A lot of young people or juniors start in residential leasing and then they get into sales because it's quicker cash flow. But everything that you learn in leasing is 100% applicable to sales. Because when you look at a property, how are you going to determine the value? Well, you've got to go back to the sales, or you've got to know what is the typical income that property can generate, be able to build a model Yes, it has 5,000 square foot retail. Well, I know retail in this space, I can look on the MLS or the last deal I did, it's 20 bucks net. So I know, okay, this is how much income I'm gonna put here. So there may actually be value add if my client can purchase this and the current tenant is only paying 8 bucks net for retail space, but we know the market's 15. Well, there's tremendous upside there. Or if there's office space upstairs, yes, I worked on office deals. I can look at the lease. Okay, oh, actually, this lease doesn't mean anything because there's a termination clause here in 3 months. So really, we're not going to place any value on it. So everything that you learn in leasing, you can apply to sales. Arash can address the development side because that's his specialty in land sales. And that's why we complemented each other so well, because his experience, tremendous experience in land sales and development with my leasing background and investment sales, it worked very well.
No, they don't make land anymore, right?
No.
Sell real estate, sell land, they don't make it anymore?
No.
Is that your slogan?
Yeah, no more land. You have to buy the existing.
Unless in Dubai, they create land over there.
Yeah, but even that now is too costly, and the keep-up cost is it's tremendous, and it's just doesn't make sense. But in here now, there has been a lot of development that's happening more within the boundary of the city. So it's not like the old days that they want to expand the city. The new guideline that came out last July actually is that all the development should be focused within the city where there is the existing infrastructure, not anymore like the old days, they buy a 100,
Stretch out all over the place, yeah.
That's not the play anymore, until
And
2041.
is that primarily because the governments, local and the provincial, they don't have the money for infrastructures?
Well, they came to a conclusion that expanding the city is not going to help building the city. They
Yeah.
already have the infrastructure within the boundary of the city. Why would they expand it when they can go higher?
Just tear it down and.
Yeah, and also we do have a strong lobbies from the environmental group. I mean, all of these acts, the Oak Ridge Marine Conservation, Green Belt, all of these came to effect after year 2000. And they've been extremely strong, and there has been a big push from those guys that they don't want to see any more of these farmland or jungles to be developed as residential. They say we can focus more within where there is the infrastructure. There is much less cost for the city, for the region, for the province. And the infrastructure is already there. So
it's a little bit more what you're describing than intensification, just
it
high-rise.
is. That's what it is. Best example is that right here, Yonge and 16.
Yeah. Never existed before, high-rise. Well, I mean, there's some high-rises, but.
Some highways, but
There's an
now
office building, 9251 was the only.
Yeah.
that was the only office. But now everything along Yonge has been designated for mid-rise to high-rise.
You know what, if I could, those of you that are familiar with Richmond Hill, prior to a few years ago, there was hardly any new buildings that were going up.
Okay.
And most of the buildings, when, say, I do the stats for the Royal LePage new home sales or house sales, and the average sale, let's say in Richmond Hill, was always low, about 350 or 250, because they're all old buildings, and nice square footage in that, but the buildings were sold at the common expenses were higher. And all of a sudden, some of these new buildings have come up, and all of a sudden the prices have gone sky high, but there's still, the average is still being brought down by the older buildings. So it's only been a few years that we've had all of these buildings. And I remember years ago, Tridel used to be the primary condo builder. And I remember on Yonge Street, one of these buildings that the new developer decided to build a condo, and he had a big sign that said, "This is not a Tridel project." So I just thought I'd mention that what Arash is saying is that with the intensification, and the intensification essentially means water and sewage, they're not going to give allocation. You could have the best piece of land outside of the area that the allocation area, and they're going to give the water and sewage to a project that's in the area that Arash is saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's all the focus is within the city, especially all along the regional or the main road. That's where they want all the development. And again, because of the transit and the infrastructure that exists, so there is no cost to the city, to the region to expand those. They could just use the existing infrastructure.
And that taxes back to the
Yeah, I mean,
municipality.
today, on a piece of land, they're getting, I don't know, $50,000 or $100,000 on 1 acre land. They build a high rise, they get $5 million in taxes.
Millions of dollars, yeah.
You know, they build 200 apartment, each unit pays anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 on taxes.
Not to mention the levies.
Yeah.
The levies, well, you know, today is, to build a 200 unit apartment, the levies alone cost the developer probably about 13 million. It's about 65,000.
Explain how analytically you guys went through with that software that, we tried out there for a while.
Argus.
Argus,
And the details that you inputted into that to get the cost of a project and then with the profit, and all the time that it took. Like, it's not just a quick math.
no, because we have to get all this different reports. So, in order for me to, I have to go through the actual process of developing a piece of land or a development. So what happened is that when we looked at a piece of land, we had to come up what would be the financial modeling on that piece, how much profit the developer will make. That's how we could price the land. It wasn't only about how much density we could get. That's one way to look at the value of the land. But in order to maximize the profit for the seller, we have to show to the purchaser that if you buy this land, you go through this whole planning process, this is what the profit would look like. In order for us to do that, typically what we needed is that, first we look at the cost of the land acquisition, how much was the price of the land, how long it will take us to carry that land for the next 2 or 3 years to get it through the approval process, what was the cost of getting it approved, how much interest we have to pay during that term, and then on top of that, we have to look at the servicing cost for the land, how much the construction would cost, and how long it will take for us to start selling those units, and when would be the exit. So we have to look at that entire model and look at maybe 5 to 10 different reports and gather all the numbers and then put it into this financial model or Argus software, and then based on that, it could give us a projection profit.
But the input, each item, each entry, would you say there was 100 entries at least?
Yeah, because
or more?
When we say land acquisition, that means the cost of acquiring the land,
legal
how much
fees,
mortgage you're gonna get, legal fees, disbursements,
Broker
lawyers,
fees.
brokers, mortgage brokers, land transfer tax. Those were just the beginning, those 8 items, just to buy a piece of
And
land.
those are the large items. Yeah.
Those were the large items. Forget about the smaller item, 5,000 here, 10,000 over there. 5,000 appraisal, $20,000 environmental, servicing consultant anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000. Archaeological, we just did an archaeological report on a piece of land, just to give you an idea. It cost us $200,000. On a $1.4 million transaction, we ordered an archaeological report. In order for us to get a clearance, it took us 2 years with a cost of $200,000.
And that adds to it takes away from the profit sometimes.
Yeah, because we sold the land 1.4, we find out we have to do the archaeological report. Seller had to do it. The city will not give a clearance for the purchaser to do anything, and it took 2 years. So think about it, $1.4 million, we sold the land 2 years ago. At 5% interest on an annual basis, that's about $140,000 in 2
Not to
years.
mention the land is worth probably $3-4 million
Now, and it costs us another $200,000 just to do that. And this is just a simple piece of land to build a state house on it, on a single family. I'm not talking about a development land. And this could happen to any piece of land. So
This software is so amazing that you would do a projection that you'd be able to, you hear that 3 years, 5 years, 20-year projects. So if you projected that in 3 years, you'd be able to start building and sell, but then there's a delay. Now you'd have to go through all that math. If you did it manually with a calculator or even with Excel, you would have to go through each and every one of those calculations and move it to a year or 18 months or 2 more years. And that would take an extreme length of time. But this software, one of the things that was just amazing, once you entered all of these costs and you have your projected data and your profits, then if it's extended, all you had to do was pick up the line.
The line and move it forward.
And move it over. Within seconds, all the calculations were done for you. But the software wasn't cheap, but it was well worth the money, because if you have to pay someone to recalculate that, it would probably take a month.
Typically, Altus is a good example. They do these projections. On a smaller scale project, they charge you about $20,000
To build that model.
Yeah.
to build that model. And that's, I'm talking about to build like a 20 houses, not a complex of 100, 200 unit apartment building.
But and the software is what it is.
And they use
but-
the same software. They actually own the software.
But you have to know what to put in there.
That's the
Every line that you put in, if you screw it up and you put the wrong number, then if you use that and it's wrong, that's why you need an accountant or somebody that. So we were going to, we tried it out, and at first we thought that we might be able to pass it on to the agents. But then, so we just restricted it to Ali and Arash, primarily because the liability would have been horrendous. If, let's say that, someone were to do these calculations and sell the project based on the calculations that you've done, and then if it was wrong, then you would have been sued for giving them the wrong information. So that's why it was never passed on. We just allowed them to use. You still use it at all?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I still use it. I have it on my old computer because we didn't update it, so.
It's still good though.
Yeah, it's still working
Do we-
until that
do we
computer
still have
dies.
it, John? Do we still have it?
No, even if we did, we would not, if you wanted it, you would have to buy it yourself. Primarily, there's too much liability.
Yeah, I understand.
Because you have to be skilled and you have to be trained on it. It was not a simple like I said, every line, just picture that it's an Excel spreadsheet, and every line, it's a heavy duty program. And, the developers use it, the planners use it.
Pension funds.
Pension funds. But the input, the old computer expression, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So if you make a mistake, then you get sued for millions of dollars. It wasn't worth the liability. But so we've got a bird's eye view on the experience that both of these guys have gone through. And believe me, they've had experience in making money. They've had experience in
Losing money.
losing money. And,
More experience in losing money.
well, and some of it really, really hurt. But let's take a few questions, and then we'll pick up where we left off here. So far, what you probably have heard is how commercial is done. So sometimes, I get asked all the time, especially brand new agents, when we finish the OREA program, they come in and say, I want to do commercial. So I'm always curious why they want to do commercial. And they say, because I get to work 9 to 5, get to deal with millions of dollars, and say, well, that's probably a good idea. And do you think that it's relative? Anyway, I go through, a little bit of questions and answers, because they don't have a concept of that point, what commercial is, except, they feel that it's kind of an elevated position. It's like I want to go right to the top and make all these millions of dollars. Once they realize that it's not quite that simple, I encourage them to just get your skills in residential, and then slowly the commercial will find your way. And like you guys did, you started off doing everything, and then slowly you specialized. But let's handle some questions, and then we'll continue on. Anybody have a question?
Arash, you mentioned archaeological report, so it took about 18 months, you said?
2 years.
2 years. Obviously, you were well past the due diligence period on that. First.
Yeah, we had a 30 days due diligence. We had to waive it, but then after the due diligence, the purchaser went to the city. The city told him that we need to do that. And since he wanted the deal, he asked us, and we told the seller this is the requirement. So two things can happen. Either we can try to cancel the deal, which is not going to happen because we did not know about it, and now the purchaser find out about it, but he still wants the deal. So the best scenario is try to accommodate him and see. And we did not expect the cost and the amount of time that it would take to get this report.
So what would have happened if this land was deemed of archaeological significance?
Well, when it is, then they have to remove whatever they find and they'll make a report. It's not like that you cannot build on the land. Typically, that's not the case. If they find it, what they are trying to do is to get a sense of the history. So it's not really found bones in the land that really doesn't have any value, but it's mostly about the history of the land. And sometimes they could find just a dog bone, and they're going to claim that it's an archaeological significance to this land. And now we have to do and that's what happened.
So that would have added more time to the whole
Yeah.
process, potentially years.
Could be, depending what they find. So when we had to do this report, the guy he did a phase 1, which is said, yeah, there could be some potential. Then they had to do the phase 2, and then it suggested in the phase 2 that we have to start digging. Now, when we talk about digging, it's not like that they will bring an actual excavator and start digging. 20 people come with a small shovel within that area, which they think they might have something.
And brushes.
That's what they do. And that's what it takes.
Damage, whatever's there.
Yeah. Everything gets pinned in yellow, red, blue, and it was like a crime scene. And with a small shovel, everyone you see with a small shovel start digging. And that could take years because with this weather that we have in here, they cannot work during the winter. If it's rainy, they cannot work. It has to be only a sunny day or a cloudy day for them to work. And that could add into the
As
cost.
an outcome of this, would you suggest, is this something that could have been preventable, or do you suggest adding a condition, according to?
It depends. Usually, it's better if you go to the city and ask them if there are any significance to this land or no. Usually, the city have the map. We had no idea that this was part of those because the land was serviced. It was approved from within the city of King. It was approved in 2006. My client serviced the entire subdivision in 2007. There was no mentioning that we have to do archaeological report.
Why was there no mention of it?
We don't know.
Regulations change as well.
And regulation change. Rules change maybe after they find something in another piece of land close by that area, and maybe that's what got the city to think, well, maybe we should do a report. I'll give you another example. Anybody knows what Endangered Species Act is? Have you guys even heard about that?
Yeah.
So you've heard. Anybody else?
It's,
Okay. So Endangered Species Act came into effect in 2008. This act talks about animals and talks about trees. And basically some of these, let's say animals or trees are designated as endangered species and you cannot cut them. I was with a litigation lawyer this morning just about this matter. Again, we sold a piece of land. The city gave us the clearance, everything was done. We went, we serviced the whole land, we sold it. Now it's 2 weeks to the closing. The purchaser ordered an arborist to go and see the land after the waiver of his condition. Now the arborist comes back and tells us, well, there is a butternut tree, which is designated as an endangered species. Now there are 3 types. If you are type 1, you can cut it. If you are type 2, well, if you cut it, you have to install, 50 more. If it's type 3, you have to stay 100 feet from that tree.
Yeah.
And when we ask them,
seems like the buyer wants to back out on the deal.
it's not about the buyer.
It's the city.
He cannot build on that land. So we sold the land $2 million. If he cannot build on it, what's the value today?
It seems like he found a way to get out of the deal.
No.
No, if he wants to build.
You buy this piece of land and you want to build, and you go to the city and they tell you you have to stay 100 feet from that tree. How are you going to build?
So if the city already approved the site, why is it?
Because the act wasn't in play.
What was the size of this parcel?
2 acres. So the tree is right in the middle of the land. So now we are going through litigation to see whose fault it is. The developer did not know because they had the clearance from the city in year 2006. So they serviced the entire subdivision. There was no problem. This act came into play in 2008. So they're accusing us that we knew about this, which in fact the developer, the lawyer, all the report we went through, nobody knew about this because the act came in 2008. It's exactly the same thing as the other deal we had with Ali. The environmental act, we had a clean phase 2. Phase 1 just talks about the condition of the site and the history. Phase 2 goes into the ground, they dig, and they send the sample to the lab, and in 30 days they tell you how many particles of each element exist within the soil, and is it within that approved level. 2008, the new act came in, they changed. They said, yeah, it should be 30 particles per millimeter, now it should be 10. Clean? Not clean. Cost? Yeah, $1 million to remove it. So how would anybody do that? We had no control over this, and it's not the first time happening, and I'm sure it will not be the last time, and I'm not the only one that this has happened. And this has nothing to do with the buyer trying to walk away. It could be a way for him to walk away, but if we get rid of that tree, that land is worth $3 million. The buyer knows that, the seller knows that.
But not if he firmed up,
The deal is firm.
so he can't get out of it.
The buyer cannot get out of it, the seller cannot get out of it. We have to wait until the closing date. And if that doesn't happen, then we have to hire a litigation lawyer to see what happened. And this morning, I had this meeting just about this.
The phases, conditions.
I'm gonna give you another example. We bought a piece of land right on Yonge. And we did the due diligence. Within our due diligence, we find out that there is a proposal from the city of Toronto to run a 10-foot wide sewer line right in the middle of this land. A $40 million land, all of a sudden the price went to $20 million.
Wow.
Because the city needed that pipe, they had to run it right within the middle of the land we were buying.
And they can expropriate.
Oh yeah, you cannot,
And they won't
they're
pay
not
a-
gonna change anything because they're gonna service 1,000 different houses. So these are something that it's out of anybody's control. I mean, you try to do all the reports and to cover all your bases, but you just never know. Yes?
So I have two questions. Okay, one is if a piece of property is clean, let's say it's commercial, that's phase 1, phase 2, but you know that somewhere like so many meters away in the history, someone has totally contaminated all the property.
If you have a phase 2
Yeah.
and it shows it's clean,
Yeah.
that's all it matters. Now, keep
But
that in
the
mind.
contamination is history. You know what you're talking about, your history.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
No, because it's on another piece of land. What happened is that when they do the phase 1, one thing they look at is they look at the underground rivers. And where is the flow? Is it coming towards this land or is it going the other way? If this land you're talking about is sitting lower than the land you're planning to sell and the rivers or the underground is going the other way, you don't need a phase 2. I've bought a piece of land right beside a gas station.
Yeah.
We did a phase 1 and they recommended there was no need of the phase 2 because the underground rivers were going the other direction. The bank accepted it. We were fine with it. Now, keep that in mind. The environmental rule for commercial land being used as to residential use is different. So you could have a report that states that it's clean for commercial use. When you go to residential, they're going to tell you it's not clean. And the difference is the amount of particle that they find in the soil. That's one thing they look at. Also for residential, they go deeper. Usually for commercial, they go up to 8 to 10 feet. For residential land, they go up to 30 feet. So if you're buying a piece of land, you have to know in advance, are you going to use it as residential or the plan is for the use to stay the same? And in order for you to cover all the bases, you could ask your client when they are doing the phase 2, ask for a phase 2 based on the residential guideline if the plan is to convert this piece of land. Cost you at the beginning $10,000 and it could save your client millions of dollars in lawsuits or losses.
In the offers, phase one, how much time would you allow for the conditional period, and phase two?
Phase one takes anywhere
30
from,
days?
yeah, 3 weeks usually.
Okay.
And usually they can even tell you verbally that it's okay. So when you have a relationship with those companies, they'll tell you it's clean. They send you an email that it's clean, so you could waive the condition because the report could take longer.
Mhm.
But if they're not sure,
It's
they're gonna
enough-
tell you.
It's enough to waive it.
Yeah, it's
And
enough to
phase
waive
two,
it.
how long do you require?
That-
Seasonally,
Typically, it's about 30 days after the phase one. Because they have to
Okay.
go do the digging, they have to send the sample to the lab. By the time they get it back,
So
it's already
60 days.
30 days. And then to give you the actual report could take 2 more weeks probably.
okay, so
And this
60
is
days.
just for the regular phase two,
Right.
nothing complicated. And also it depends how many holes they have to dig and which area they have to dig.
So I want to just add to these scenarios. It's not the end of the world if the site is contaminated.
Yeah.
Or if you have a commercial site and you want to go to a residential site. Because you could always find an entity, a lender, that will lend you money to either clean it because they can see the upside, or put a record of site conditions. So put a plan together, an environmental plan together that mitigates or delineates the exposure in terms of contamination. So what they'll do is they'll do further investigation. They'll actually say the contamination is contained in this quadrant of the land. This is what we're going to do. Either we're going to dig and take it out, or put up some walls, or we're going to encase it in concrete. Therefore, it won't have any impact on humans, or it's going to be covered all with concrete because there's going to be a parking. Then there's going to be this much space before the first residential, or there'll be common area. So there's ways to navigate that issue. It's not the end all and be all just because you have an environmental issue. And more lenders are becoming comfortable because the new guidelines, if you put salt on your property is contaminated.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, that's the new
Yeah, but
guideline.
if you have a storefront, you gotta salt, because the city, we have a storefront, the city has to salt just the sidewalk, but there's a foot or two, if someone slips in front
You're
of you.
contaminating your property as per the new guidelines.
Oh, that's crazy.
Which means look for other ways.
There was
Someone
actually
takes
an
a
article a
blip,
week ago in Globe and Mail about the salt.
There's no.
And how they are contaminating the entire
So the
city.
city, yes.
The ecosystem, because it all runs off and it goes into the
That's in
thing.
Lake. yeah. I want to change, okay,
Can I
one
have a
more,
question
then I want
about
to change it to
assembly?
something else.
Okay, so in your experience, because you guys have worked with people to try to assemble, because with the city of Toronto, there's a lot of intensification going on. Like, you know, I'm talking in St. Clair now, right? I see how people have sold their buildings and they're building. And some of those guys, they don't want to let go of their buildings. It's very difficult. In your experience, how have you managed to get 3 or 4 people on board for an assembly? Do you include them in the project? What's your
So-
strategy?
There are many different ways. First, you have to know what kind of seller you're dealing with. Sometimes you have to offer them extra money. Sometimes you have to give them a piece of the pie.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is that if the guy is going to build on it, well, you're gonna get the, let's say, 2 of the retail store or something to replace it for them. It all depends. There is no.
The more you listen to the seller, they will tell you what kind of deal they want. Keep in mind, developers don't want partners.
Yeah.
They're already dealing with too many headaches. They don't want to make a deal that someone overlooks, and it's not intentional. They don't want to make a deal because development, if you're assembling a site, it's not a 1 or 2 year or 3 year project, it's a 5 to 7 year project. You make a deal with a guy, yes, when we finish the project, we're going to give you at cost 1 retail unit and a condo. Guess what? You sell that project or you have new partners and then it sells again. No one's going to remember this deal if they didn't properly doc. In the best of times, they won't remember. So developers typically try to stay away from making those type of deals. So listen to the client, see what kind of, what kind of deal they
One
want.
thing I suggest is try to stay away from assembly. Usually they fall apart because there is an idiot in the middle that he
It's
wants
always the
4
king
million
piece.
on a 1
You have to be
million.
very, very patient, or have a developer that's willing to write a check at any cost.
One of our agents that specializes in assemblies, a couple of years ago, he had, I'll keep that in mind. He had $1 million worth of connections. He had, I think, 4 or 5 assemblies, you know the stories.
In there.
Yeah, been there, done that a few times. And he was lucky that one closed, and he made, he made his money, a little bit of money. But he did not make $1 million or $500,000. He made, fortunately for him, he's financially secure. But imagine if you're counting on $1 million and you go to Iran like Arash did that time. I'm kidding.
Is that the year you came back?
No, we're kidding, we're kidding.
No.
Just teasing him. No, he's responsible. He goes back and forth because they want to. It's their homeland. So what, fortunately for him, he didn't have to worry because, he has sufficient funds. And commercial is not for the weak of heart, so to speak. You have to have enough money to sustain you for years. But if you're counting on a commission, as a lot of agents do, when you do the deal, you spend it 3 times usually. A lot of the time with commercial, you're going to be disappointed because the deal may close, and even if it closes, you may not get paid. And that's happened many times. But before we get to that, we can get to that area another time, but or later on. But what I want to get into a little bit is when you have a buyer that wants to buy something, whether it's commercial land or whatever, how do you find the product? Let me ask a few questions that I get asked all the time. That's one of them. How do you search? Where do you search for the properties? And it's kind of universal anyway because it applies to, unless they're in MLS, then you have to revert back to these other areas of search. But help me out, or help the agents out with this question. We know that the ones that are familiar with commercial, that you always have to protect your clients or your listing or the property, primarily because everyone wants to know who your client is so that they can take them away from you. And if you identify where the property is, and if you have not secured either the buyer or the seller, that you can rest assured that you're not going to be dealing with that property, because the commissions and the numbers are way too high that they can go behind your back. And then also with the commercial houses, and you guys have a lot of experience with it, they constantly want the agents and the buyers to sign off on the non-disclosure agreements. And I always love the line, your client's name and preferably the phone number as well. So if you can help us out with that area that really involves protecting your commission and your clients, even before you get into searching for land and doing the deals and what have you. And I'll go a little bit further and say that there's no 100% protection against it, because there's 1,000,001 ways to get around it. So what you see they're snickering already because they know what I'm saying. So in other words, if you have a really great relationship with the clients that you're dealing with, your percentage of success in collecting a commission if you do a deal is much higher than if you do not have a great relationship with the clients. Help me out with this, because that comes up all the time, especially with the commercial houses, that we know what they do. They just want your client's name, and then they call them right away and say, hey, you want to deal directly with me.
I think
Not that you ever did.
it kind of goes back to becoming a specialist in one segment or one area. Yes, you're dealing with a big dollar values, big numbers, and unless you have, as you said, let me back up. Even when you have a piece of paper signed, doesn't mean they're going to pay you. We have to deal with that every day. At the last moment, they want a discount, they want this. If you hope to do business with them again, then give them a deal. Or if they're big enough, sometimes they'll just really don't pay you. I don't care. Let's go to court. Guess who has more money? They do. So what are you going to do? You're going to hire a lawyer and you're going to fight them for your fees. So you take steps to protect yourself. So either you make sure the fees go into, or the first deposit goes into a trust account, so at least you have line of sight to that money. In terms of protecting yourself, in this market, my opinion is buyers, unfortunately, are at a disadvantage. You want to get to the product, because to find the buyer is a lot easier than to control the product, unfortunately. So then what is your game plan? leasing to get to the product, to turn it into a sales scenario, becoming a specialist, building relationships. And yeah, we've made a lot of mistakes on how not to make money. For you to pick up a phone and call us and say, what do you think of this scenario? We may have seen it 100 times. Don't waste your time. And it doesn't mean that we become your partners or we're looking for something. Pick up the phone. This is a scenario. What do you think? Okay, do this, get this form signed, or call so-and-so, tell them. It doesn't mean that you pick up the phone. But sometimes, if you think it's real and you really need help, well, have that conversation with the other agent and say, this is what I'm bringing to the table. I will manage the client. I will get all the forms signed. I will go to all the appointments. And I want to be your partner. And guess what? I'm bringing this opportunity because I want you to teach me. That's a fair thing to expect for a partner. But don't expect to just hand a name and say, okay, now I want 50% of the fees, and you have to protect me, and you have to do this. Because yes, guess what? Arash and I, after a while, we never provided our clients' names and anymore. We registered the company, and we always signed the company's name. That's the NDA. That was our strategy. So either AFA Group or Rumi Capital, or we used to sign Royal LePage. We're buying it for Royal LePage to protect. And that's okay, that's not illegal. Royal LePage, there's investors within all the Royal LePage that may want to buy it. And as long as you disclose that with the manager, we're going after this product, are you okay? Can you sign this? So we get the confidential information, then you determine. And then it's all about relationship based. As much as technology will help you get the information, design, communicate, it's about relationship. I still maintain all my relationships from my CBRE days. They're all VPs, senior VPs. I pick up the phone, hey, what's going on as a kid? Yeah, that property, what's it about? How many bids did you get? What do you think it's going to sell at? Is it worth us coming in? Yeah, I know you're not cooperating in commission, but will you give me a fair chance? Yeah, Ali, hey, yeah, bring in a strong buyer. We don't want any bullshit, what this, that. So I kind of touched on a whole bunch of different things, but.
Yeah, I was in that situation where all of a sudden one property had to go to these guys, it was a bid, it was totally biased. But later on, when I saw what it sold for on land registry, our offer was better. So to me, I believe they did a back-end deal somewhere.
That's very typical, not the
Yeah.
first time.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be the last.
That's what I think, because we had a cash deal, and then all of a sudden you see it a few hundred thousand less, and you're thinking, okay, what happened here?
And unfortunately, sometimes.
Like, how do you handle that? They say, okay, come in, but you don't even have.
You take it as it comes. Unfortunately,
handle
you have
it
no
anyway.
control.
Yeah.
That's why you have
It
to
is
go
what
after
it
the
is.
product. You have no control.
I noticed that most of the commercial business obviously is through exclusive listings. I would say, based on my experience, as I started, more than a half, nobody really goes after MLS listings that much as they want to.
No, the MLS is only the shitty product that
That they can't sell.
Right.
They're hoping that
In
some.
case if something good actually comes out, it gets sold.
Well, but let me make a
No,
comment.
you can't say that.
So
I put my cousin's property on MLS.
Yeah, but let me say this about the MLS, and they're absolutely right. The commercial buyers and sellers traditionally have always said, if it's on MLS, don't bother showing
I
it to
have
me.
several clients that told me that. They don't
But
want to sell
there's something else to be said about that. Once in a while, a residential agent that has a relationship with a builder, developer, whatever, screws up. And he puts something of golden value on MLS. So there's nothing wrong with looking at the MLS because there's a lot more residential agents today doing commercial than there ever has been, primarily because all of the information is now available. And we've got a lot of ethnic groups that have relationships. Well, let's take the Asians, for instance. Well, they want to deal with their own Asian agents, primarily for the culture and language and everything else, familiarity. And so just to pick a residential agent that may have a relationship, and they want to buy a pile or they want to sell a plaza or something. And he makes a mistake. He figures, well, I don't know anybody. I'm just going to put it on the MLS. And that sometimes ends up being a really good deal. But having said that, the old rule still applies. A lot of developers, a lot of people that own properties, commercial or whatever, they don't want it on MLS because they don't want the world to know that it's for sale. It could affect their financing if they're trying to refinance the
Their
project that they're ready.
credibility.
Credibility. And for instance, if a restaurant, if you're selling restaurants, it's just as an example. Well, you don't want to advertise it. I mean, would you go and eat at a place if it's for sale? I wouldn't go because you know that they're in transition. They don't cut corners.
What is the best source other than MLS?
Well, the best source is relationships. We're getting back to the old relationship because let's say that you have a buyer that wants to buy a piece of land. Well, now, and they need financing. Well, here's two guys that are sitting at the front here. You call Arash or even Ali because he knows his stuff as well, and you say, look, I've got a buyer that's got $30 million, but you got to qualify the buyer. See, here's the problem that commercial guys face. They get a call from a residential agency. I've got a buyer coming in from another, my home country. He's got lots of money. He's got up to 100 million. Money's no object. Well, they're not going to be listening to you because what they want from you is what they'd rather hear is this. I have a buyer that's coming in from, let's say, Iran, and he's got $15 million, no more than $15 million. He's looking for a plaza, preferably in the GTA. He doesn't want to go to Cayuga, doesn't want to go to Niagara, but he wants to go and stay in the New York region area, and preferably with some kind of an anchor tenant. And the cap rate, they're flexible because they just want to get the money out of the country and in here. Instead of the 6 or 7 or 8 cap rate that they would prefer, they'll even take 4.5 or 5. Now, that's kind of that would make more sense to you, right?
It does, but even for those agents, we still are not gonna work with them. I don't have time to waste with anybody because everybody.
My next question will be like, send me the bank statement that the money's in Canada. Because guess what? Even if you buy that plaza, now you're gonna have problems closing on it and getting financing. As soon as a bank hears my money's coming from overseas, oh, you have a secondary set of anti-money laundering or KYC requirements. So yesterday I was on a conference call, investor, sophisticated from Dubai, they want to buy something here. So we spent the majority of the call on coaching them. Your money's ready, start transferring here, go buy a GIC, leave it in there for 3 months. So that when you're ready, the bank won't question it.
Yeah, they want to know where it's.
As an agent now, you have to deal with so many other layers that previously, even 10 years ago,
It didn't
there's
exist.
no AML KYC. They want to see, so I did a financing deal in the fall where Canadian clients, established business, established track record, were buying a piece of land. I did a deal, financing deal through BDC, 75% loan to value, et cetera, et cetera. There's 5 partners. We spent 2 months satisfying the BDC on where the money was coming from. One was taking the equity out of their house, one was getting a loan from his father-in-law, another one was putting a second mortgage on his commercial property, another one was cashing on GICs. BDC wanted to see the actual line of credit statement from the client's father-in-law that showed availability, what property was secured against. They wanted to see a copy of the check that he wrote that went into corporation. They also wanted to see the copy of the bank statement which showed that the money left the account. That's the level of due diligence you have to deal with now. So if you can give the client some heads up, listen, great, but also start thinking about all these other stuff. Have you thought about the reports that you have to do? Have you thought about how you're going to obtain financing? Well, these are, at least if you ask them or pause, give them question to pause, you're differentiating yourself from everyone else.
This is the problem. A lot of people are coming from overseas in here. I'm sure they have the money. The question is not about the money.
It's getting it here.
It's getting it here. It's the question. Can you prove it? This money is legit? Because the banks wants to see that. Unless your client has a $10 million house that is paid off, and you can prove
we did
to
this
me
3 years ago. Yeah.
that's paid off, and if the guy cannot get his money from overseas, he can go and get a loan against his house, then we look at that deal. If you're going to come to us and tell me, well, my client has $10 million, so what? My client has $1 billion. What it means? Is the money here? Is the money legit? Can you prove it? It's in his bank account.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, don't waste your time. Oh yeah, if we buy something, we're going to transfer. But good luck. No one's going to give you a year.
Even if you wanted to transfer money from the States, you're going to have the same problem, or even from Europe. So, great, if a buyer calls you, if you can't control the product, then qualify your client as much as you can. Oh, you have $500,000? Great, is it in the Canadian bank account? Is it in the savings account?
How long has it been here?
How long has it been here? And explain to them why you're asking this. Guess what? If you go and buy the property, then the bank is gonna give you a tremendous difficulty if the money isn't here already. And you're gonna be subject to a whole set of things. So why don't we look at strategies on how you can bring in your money here? Then we can go on a shopping spree. Guess what? All of a sudden, you're not every other agent they've called on the newspaper. Oh, they have some plazas, I'm gonna call them, yeah, I have $5 million. You're gonna be the only one to ask them. Great, have you thought about how you're gonna bring the money here?
As Jeff mentioned previously, I also find myself quite often in the middle between the listing agent. He says he's the listing agent. There are a couple other guys underneath him, and me and the buyer.
The
Right?
broker trail. Yeah.
And
The
then
train,
it's
sorry.
really hard to connect people. Like, how do I? Well, obviously, it's gonna come with experience because it's just my first year getting into commercial. But how do I secure myself in those exclusive listings between? How do I get to the actual listing where make sure that people do not go to the behind the
You
back?
cannot do it 100%.
Is there some kind of a form to sign or something? Like,
Forms.
You could sign any form.
I know what you
That can give you 20 different forms. That doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. If they want to go behind your back, they will, and they'll find a way. And there's nothing that you can do.
And they'll do it straight, like we have developers. 5 years ago, the developer did a deal. We had an agreement with the developer. We took him the product. He ended up closing on it. He waited and waited and waited. And there was a situation where we needed his help. We put an agreement in front of us, waiving our rights to that commission.
To
Help
sue
us.
him.
Sue him.
We didn't even know he bought it.
Yeah.
3 years down the road, we needed his help. The first thing he said, come to my office, don't
I'll
worry.
help you, not a problem. What do you need?
What do you need? You need $1 million? Here's a check for $1 million, but I need you to sign this paper. And that's what he did. We had to sign that paper to get $1 million to make sure that, the deal will happen tomorrow.
It's a rough business.
To do his deal.
No, it was someone else's deal. We needed to borrow money
We
from
needed a
this
bridge, we needed a
developer.
bridge, we needed a bridge.
So that just happened.
Did you at least get paid on the other one that you bridged?
No, and he charged 10%. Usually the fee is 5%. He charged 10% fees, and we had no choice. And this is
Still
the
working with this
reality.
guy?
Do you do business with him today?
Yeah, of course.
Here's the
And
reality.
it's a small world, okay?
No, but I mean,
It's
it
a very,
is-
very
But,
small.
but before
I've
we
seen it
move
too.
on, going back to
Yeah.
your point is that if you're gonna be in this business for long enough, you know which agent is a bullshitter and which agent is.
Go with
You
your
can
sense.
sense
Go
And-
with your gut.
and
And
don't
if
be
I'm not the
afraid.
listing agent, I'll tell you, I'm not the listing agent,
I
but I have a
would say that. I
relationship.
don't go around it.
We can go and, we'll try to figure out a way.
At the end of the day, there's legislation.
Of course.
If you ask another licensed real estate agent, if they are the listing agent, that's a direct question according to the legislation. So they gotta be pretty
I understand.
questionable if they answer the wrong way.
You ask them this question, do you have something signed?
Yeah, do you have an active listing agent?
If they do, then you can tell them, look, I don't care what commission you put down, you can black that out.
Yeah, or communicate to me in an email that
Yeah.
I have an active listing agent sign, because that puts the onus on them now. If anything comes up, at least you can make a complaint
To Rico.
to Rico.
So
And
ask
Rico's-
him to send me an email
Rico's-
to state that.
Well, but the
He's the
Rico,
listing agent.
Yeah, just ask him to send you an
Nobody's
email.
gonna do it.
but you see, here's the problem, the Rico complaint does not put money in your pocket.
No,
Yeah,
All it does is, it's
Yeah,
gotta.
and I might need to deal with him in the near future
So,
too, so.
you gotta remember one thing, and that we keep coming back to negotiating for yourself. So there's, it's like the starting block of a race, like these runners, you do the 100-meter, and the odd time you see one guy that just fumbles his way, and he's not even in the race anymore. And if you do not get off on the right foot, even then, there's no 100% guarantee. But if you do not get off on the right foot, let's say with, what did you call it, the gravy train? or-
yeah, broker trail.
Broker trail, and believe me, there's been, I've seen it where it's 6 deep.
And stay away from those, stay away, because
Those are-
you can never make that deal.
But what you do is you really have to get really, really good at figuring out which deal you want to work on and which deal you're gonna say, I'll take my chances that nothing will ever happen to this. And it's best that you deal with people that you know, that you've dealt with before. The percentages of success increases, it's never 100%. Now, here's the reality of the situation. We talk about, commercial is big money, it's, tens of millions of dollars. Today, a 30 million.
Commercial with a high commission.
Well, the higher it is, the more they drop, but if, beware if they pay you, if you do a deal for 30 million, they're paying you 4%, and they never collect, they figure,
Yeah.
Yeah, those, yeah, don't expect
Yeah.
to maintain the same commission structure as the transaction size group.
Yes, it actually goes the opposite, it keeps
It
dropping and
comes
dropping.
lower.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it turns into a fixed sometimes.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the larger brokerage firms, it's a fixed fee. Because more and more companies don't want bias from people representing them. So instead of incentivizing them as a percentage of the sale price, most boards now, if you're going to that level, or even pension funds, they're saying, we're selling this portfolio, we're gonna give you $500,000. That's it. If it sells for 10 million or if it sells for 50 million. You're getting a fixed price.
Typical these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as the mortgage, in, I would say what, 5 to 7 million, you're still percentage, but less and less.
Up to $10 million even, I would say you are within that range that you can
It's
collect.
just like selling a house, a high end.
Yeah, but once you start passing the $10-15 million mark, typically the commission is anywhere from $750,000 up to $1.5 million.
And that's
Even
usually split
even
up between
on a
bunch of
$200 million deal, the
No one's gonna
maximum
pay.
they'll pay you is about $1.5 million. And they're not gonna pay if I sell an asset for $200 million. I have to have an entire lineup of people assisting me to make that transaction happen. That's how they're gonna pay, that they have different advisors,
They have
even
a
for
team.
the agents. It's a team. It's not just one agent that's think that they're gonna come and do a $200 million deal and they're gonna get paid 1.5%, $3 million and retires. That's.
We had an agent a month or so ago, he was working on,
Agent.
yeah, he was working on some resales with another agent in the Vaughan office, he's from another office. And then he dropped the resales, they were on their way to making a few deals. He says, I don't need to do this anymore, because I'm working on a $200 million deal. And so he drops the resale, the $200 million deal, never got off the block. And so then he went back, trying to get back into those deals. And they said, sorry, you backed up and you documented it, you're out of it. So he lost he could have made $10,000, $15,000 in resales. Never give up the small deals, they pay the bills. I just want to make one comment as far as we're talking about large numbers, millions or 100,000. So my background is that I work with lawyers. And I can tell you that when a client would come in and would ask, how can I screw an agent out of a commission? We used to give them advice, the lawyers would sit down and believe me, there's, right from the outset, I'll give you an example. I had dinner one night with some lawyers that I worked with, and one guy's a judge, right across the street at the restaurant here about 6 months ago. And we were talking about the 15% that the government put in. And my former boss, he's a Queen's Counsel, says, oh, that's easy. So right away, he says, that's easy how to get around it. So he made his suggestion, just incorporate a company. And it's the undertaking a Canadian company. There's a little bit more to it. But basically, and then the other guys, the judge and everybody else, one guy is a billionaire. He's married into a billionaire family. And he's saying, oh, I don't know why they bother doing all of this. There's 1,001 ways to get around it. So sitting at the table, I was like the petty cash guy, the value. From my work to the guy that's, married to a billionaire family, to the guys in between, you're talking about high-end lawyers that do this for a living. So what I'm trying to say is, all they have to do is ask a lawyer, and the lawyer will give them at least a dozen ways to get around it. So relationships, paperwork, yes, paperwork is important, but the relationship is even more important.
And make sure your contracts and the language is precise. Of course, yes, they can do whatever they want, but typically it's pretty hard. I mean, yeah, they can take you to court, they can not pay you and stuff, but make sure the deposit goes into a real estate trust account, and then a judge would have to
Well,
order.
but even that, the real estate trust account, and you're absolutely right. The real estate trust account with Rigo, we go through it all the time with Vivian, where we get a letter from a lawyer saying, I represent the seller, we're disputing close, please issue a check to the seller. And then I write back and say, well, according to our Rigo guidelines, we require mutual release,
Or a judge order.
a direction, or a court order. And then now the lawyers, they start hammering away and say, well, according to the offer, anyway, we say, you give us one of those three documents, and we'll give you the money. But here's what a lot of even brokers don't know. Mutual releases, you technically do not need the broker's signature and to release the trust funds. If the buyer and the seller, let's say a rationale that one's a buyer, one's a seller, and they have $1 million in our trust account in the Royal Picture community, and we get a direction, funds, so they both sign off, and it's a two-line direction. We hereby authorize you to pay the $1 million being held in your trust account payable to Ali. Then we have to, even if the deal didn't close, and that happens sometimes, we have no option. We cannot hold it back because we have to release that money according to the direction. So here's what happens. So you alluded to the fact that you put the money in the trust account, that you got some leverage over there. Well, if they wanted to screw you, what they do is they get the direction. We have to pay it out now to wherever they want to pay it out. And the next thing you know, you can go
Yeah,
after
but that would mean that the buyer and the seller both want to.
Now, Arash has given me permission. Years ago, he had a deal that didn't close. Let's say, for argument's sake, that it was $450,000 commission. And so the deal, the buyer went behind the back. Were you involved in that one too, or just you left him alone? So what happened is the deal didn't close. The deal closed with the buyer that he represented, and happened to be a billionaire. And basically, Arash says, "Why aren't you paying the commission?" The guy says, "I'm not paying it." And sue me. Now, Arash, we went through legal opinions and we went to lawyers, and the results were the same. And the lawyer said, well, you want to spend $500,000 on legal fees to collect nothing? The guy's got more money than God. So what did he have to do? He could not pursue it because he could have spent $350,000, $400,000 to maybe collect
And that would have
$400,000.
taken
5 years.
5 years, and the emotion involved in that deal.
You wouldn't have earned any money for 5 years because your mind would
And
be
it
on
would
that.
end up costing, so.
So what was the reason that they didn't want?
Didn't want to pay.
Why?
Just decided, because he can.
He wanted to buy Ferrari probably.
But you don't have the
He was
money in the
receiving
trust.
service, this is
Doesn't
not
matter.
fair.
No, that we're trying to give you a reality check. I use the example, the difference between residential and commercial is this. Residential
There
is,
was the deposit.
Even $1 million check, I still have the check for $1 million from that client. I still have the agreement. In the agreement, even clearly states that 2% was the commission. And I still have the check, and I have all the paperwork, and I have all the emails, and I have the entire track record to show that this buyer was introduced to this property through me.
Oh,
The problem with that deal was that what happened is that the buyer bought the deal. The way he did it, he did the share purchase after. And the closing of the share purchase happened 2 years down the road. So not only the transaction didn't happen within the land registry system to go after him, he did it in a different way. Now, when you do a share purchase, since we're not licensed under the Security Act, you're not entitled to the commission.
Correct.
And the other funny thing is that there was a case which agent from CB sued actually the seller sued the agent from CB for the commission, and they went to court and they won.
he won.
They said you're not licensed to act under the Security Act. How could you collect the commission? This wasn't a transaction, and they won. There has been 2 cases already that
We're
I know.
licensed under the Business Brokers
you
Act.
should have any.
We can sell assets, not shares.
It doesn't matter. What he's saying is,
Is that true?
No.
Because
Yeah, it's
you're
true.
correct.
Under the
It's true.
Business
they
Brokers
say you
Act,
can
he's
sell
right.
the share of
No.
corporation.
No, you're not allowed.
We're not licensed. We
We're
can sell
not allowed.
assets of the business.
You have buyer side or seller side.
it doesn't
Both.
matter. Doesn't
I
matter.
was sitting on both, I was representing the buyer
What
and
agreement do
the
you
seller.
have with the buyer or seller? Seller commission agreement or?
It doesn't apply because he did a share purchase.
Here's how it works. We're licensed under,
switched-
under the Real Estate and
switched.
Business Brokers Act. We are licensed to sell real estate. We're not licensed to sell shares in a company. So if, you have to be licensed under the Securities Act.
That's right.
To be paid by, so here, there's a workaround system. So some agents, they want to do a share purchase. Well, we don't know how to do those documents. Some agents come in and ask me, do you have a share purchase agreement? Yes, I know how to do share purchases, but we don't get paid on it. We're not licensed on it. But there's a workaround system. A lawyer will have to create a contract for services rendered. Because if, what happens is this, again, going to
Oh, it's
lawyers.
written right in the share purchase. that they-
Well,
they
it's a
commission.
separate, the share.
Separate.
No, it's a consulting
Separate.
agreement. It's not
Consulting
even-
agreement.
No, the share of the corporation.
It's a consulting agreement.
Because if you own the share of the corporation, it means that you own that piece of property that the corporation owns.
You're selling the company and the assets.
Yeah.
So a lot of agents, what they do is they do the deal and they're expecting to get paid. In the meantime, the seller has already checked with the lawyer that, hey, you can do the deal, but at the end of it, you don't have to pay them a commission because legally they're not entitled to it. And that's why these court cases support the fact that we're not licensed under the Securities Act and we're not entitled to the commission. So if you're ever doing a share purchase, check with us, but you need a strong lawyer that knows how to do these contracts. And it's the same way as you go out of province to try and sell something in Quebec or some other place.
Is there any way to get the license for that?
Yeah,
Is there any
you could get the license. It's not that,
Get securities license?
yeah.
Securities.
Yeah,
If
I
you
had
get
that-
the
I had that
license-
license back in the day.
Are you keeping it?
No, it expired. I used to work at the bank, that's why.
Even today, you can still go and get it back. I think you can reopen the license. So it might be
I
an
can
option.
park it somewhere.
Yeah.
So this guy was rotten. I agree for not following through and doing, but the advice that he got was like, from his lawyer's point of view, he directed him a different way to just save his client a little bit of money. So as a protection amount for yourself was to get a share, what is?
Canadian securities.
And that's a way that you would be covered, that in the event that this would happen again to you, that you would be selling the share?
So you have to.
In advance, you have to know exactly how this gonna plays out.
But like with millions of dollars in mind,
At the end of the day, what it comes down to, it's a relationship you have with the seller or the buyer. I give you an example. I deal with a company called Conservatory Group. They're one of the largest builder in Toronto. The family, I think, is the 5th richest family in Canada, and they're among the top 100 family in the world. The way they do their business is that I bring them the deal, they'll sign the buyer agency, and they tell me, okay, you got 12 months to get this deal done. If you don't get it done and someone else after 12 months bring it to us, we're gonna deal with that agent, which is fine. But they're giving me that 12 months. Where does that come from? It's a relationship. I was sitting in another builder's office, he gets a phone call, and you probably heard this story, he gets a phone call that such land came up for sale. I was sitting there, he was talking to the agent so nice, oh yeah, which one? Yeah, I've heard about it, oh, let me check. Oh yeah, you know what, I know about it, I'm not interested. He hangs up the phone, I was sitting right there. You know this guy? Why don't you go and see him, Arash, and see if you can get the deal for me? I don't want to deal with that agent. It's a relationship that I built with that developer or the builder or that client. If you have such relationship, you don't have to worry about 50 different documents. I'm not saying that don't get it signed. Obviously, you try to build a paper trail as much as you can. But if you have that relationship, you don't have to worry about all of these. You can focus on what you do best. Finding the deals, trying to evaluate it, and try to sell it to your client. That's what it comes on.
So I wanted to describe to you the difference between residential and commercial. So those of us that like to go to Buffalo, let's say, or you want to cross the border to the Buffalo side, you can either drive through, you can walk, you can cycle. You really have to jump off a bridge to hurt yourself, to kill yourself if you want to. So that's residential. It's fairly safe, and you don't have to worry too much about collecting commission. You heard my story.
I know where you're going with.
Okay, now I'm going to describe commercial. A lot of us I like watching, the wildebeest, and I like to watch Serengeti Desert. I love watching these animal shows. And so every year, the wildebeest and animals, they cross the river in the Serengeti Desert. That's their pattern. That's what they do. Well, once a year, they have to cross this river, and underneath the water, there's all these crocodiles waiting for their annual meal. And as soon as they start crossing, these crocodiles, they'll fill themselves up for another year, and they don't have to worry about it. And that's commercial. So residential versus commercial. Now, if you're a smart part of the wildebeest, you wait till the end. Cross last, because the crocodiles are nice and full, but developers are usually not that full.
But you do that by leveraging your managers.
Oh, you throw us in first, okay. We don't taste so good, that's right.
And the other thing I want to mention in today's market, there are so many buyers. If you have the products, you really don't need a buyer. They'll line up here. Every single developer, if you have a good piece of land, I can guarantee you, even if they own billions of dollars, they'll show up at this
What's
office.
good piece of land?
That's the objection to see what's good, but
What
The
you can do with it?
Yeah, obviously, but to everyone, there are land bankers, there are developers.
they're not doing the land banking anymore as much as they used to. That whole market has shifted because of all these new rules and regulations that we have and the new requirement from the province, which came down to. So actually, that's a good read. If you guys want to read that, there's a document called PPSA, which is the Provincial Policy Growth Management for 2017, that came out on July 1st for the from the province, and that deals with all the growth. Where in Ontario the growth they want it to happen, and if you go to each of the region's official plan, then it will show you exactly until 2041 where is the boundary of the city is going to be. That has already been designated. It's called the PPSA.
PPS, statement, provincial policy statement, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Another area that.
He has a question.
Oh, sorry.
This is just general question, as a residential agent, what's the first step to start working? What you suggest as a first step to start in commercial?
Well, actually, that ties in with what I was going to suggest as well. So let me open it up and then we'll get it. As a residential agent, you come across the same people that buy and sell houses with you. They're probably in business and they have partners and they want to invest in use their locations or enlarge or do something or buy a plaza investment. So when you get one of those opportunities, you've got a couple of choices. The best thing to do is check with myself or Gregory, and what we can do is we can recommend an agent that specializes in that particular field. For instance, we have an agent, just to give you an example, a medical practitioner that she is experienced in medical. So if it's a doctor that wants to maybe buy a medical building or open up one, well, there's a specialist that then you have a choice, 3 choices. You can either try and do it yourself, and we'll walk you through it, but I wouldn't recommend it because it's really detailed. You can refer it to that specialist and get a referral fee, or if she's agreeable, you can work together on it, which is the preferred way, because that way you learn and earn at the same time. But for you to try and navigate through it, here's what happens with percentages of success. If you try and do it yourself, the success rate is not that high because you're bound to make a serious mistake and the deal will fall apart. If you refer to the wrong agent, because maybe it's going to give you a better referral fee, but they're not specialized, and everyone will tell you, yeah, I know how to do medical, I know how to do plazas, I know how to do gas stations, but we're fortunate we have agents that specialize in so many fields. And you've heard this word come up a lot today, specialization. So the preferred way is if you can learn and earn If you're agreeable, that's the best way. Otherwise, refer it and you get a referral.
But, and I wouldn't approach the learn and earn, don't say, I have a client, what's your fee? How much are you gonna share with me? You're not gonna get an answer, say, I have a client, I would like to learn from you, this is what I'm gonna do for my share, I'm gonna, provide something, so then, if someone calls me and says, like yesterday, I was calling it the referral, the first text was, what's your referral structure? I didn't even respond, like,
They don't have.
But I have an agent here, they ask about, okay, bring your buyer, I have to have an agreement with them, and I give you some too.
well, you're not interested in working, you're not
Always,
interested
they
in
ask,
working in
"Do
that.
you- do you have time? Yes, I have, bring your buyer, I have an agreement with them, I give you something. I said, how much? I don't know.
No, that you have to define in advance.
Exactly.
And always get it in writing.
But
not
typically,
You
when
know,
you,
verify.
when you deal with the commercial agent, they want to be in control of the buyer. That's very typical. So if you're gonna call me and tell me I have a buyer, I'm sure with as many as another 1,000 agents within our office, they have one. I'm not interested in that. Because I can't spend the same amount of time working on my own client. Why should I spend it on your client, which I don't have control, which I know you already did not qualify them, which I know you already did not see what they own and how much money they have. So why would I do that? It's very, I get phone calls every day from
But if I can't
agents.
qualify the buyer for that one. I have
So
to
communicate
refer
it.
and maybe forever I lose this.
No, but communicate it.
buyer.
No, say,
For the other deals.
this is my
That's
client,
a chance you have to take.
you don't have to.
But no, but you have to trust the other
I don't want
agent.
the buyer to say, okay, I'm not in here. And then after that, they go to.
It's not about you not being anything. You have to communicate that with the agent. This is my client, this is how I want to work, this is the referral I'm expecting, but I will keep this client. Now, we had a case which an agent brought a client to me and said, you're gonna get 50% of the deal as long as you do the same work as I do. You're gonna show up in every single meeting, you're gonna do all the legwork, you have to go to this town, you have to go to that engine. He agreed. And then, after the deal was done, there was a dispute between the client and that agent. They had some argument about another piece of property, and the client called me and said, I don't want to deal with that agent anymore. He's out. So what was my choice? I called the agent and said, your client doesn't want to deal with you. This is the voicemail, this is the email. You tell me what you want. And I said, on the next deal, I still give you a referral as we agreed, even though I don't have to. Because your client came to me directly asking for my help, and he doesn't want to deal with you. But after that, you're not gonna get anything, and that's a reality. Why should I, if your client doesn't want to deal with you, then why should I be even worried about that part?
Think of it this way, if they went to another brokerage, you wouldn't ever know. At least now you're knowing, so maybe you can avoid doing that behavior to lose the client. It's actually a benefit.
So handshake deals are no good. Little notes are okay, they're better than a handshake deal. Do it on one page, don't get into 3, 4, 16 pages. Make it really clear, and if in doubt, you create something, draft it up, show it to us, and we'll give you feedback on it. And that way, you have something in writing. But as we've said all morning, there's never 100% guarantee, even with the agent.
And if you're worried too much about that, I think to me, you shouldn't be working with that agent.
Right.
Simple as that. If I don't trust you, if I don't like you, I'm not gonna work with you. Very simple. Including your client. Doesn't matter how much money they have. If I don't like the client, if the client tells me something which is not true and I see that, then every time I see the client, it's the same story. Why would I want to work with
No,
them?
that's a good point. I mentioned earlier, what you do is, we all do this, when you meet someone for the very first time, you shake hands, and usually you get a feeling, is my watch still in place, So you get a feeling whether you like and trust that person. If you get a feeling that there's something fishy about them, usually the gut feel doesn't.
It's correct.
The commission is not worth it.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Move on to
More
something.
headache.
Or if you take it on, then and you're going to refer it to somebody, just refer it out. You got a referral agreement, and let someone else that specializes in that have a better shot at it. And that way you filter the clients that you like and trust. That if you have to have a handshake deal with somebody, 9 times out of 10, if you have a really great relationship, they'll look after you at the end of it. But if you do not have a relationship and there's a way to get around you, you will.
And other thing I want to mention is that most residential agents, they don't realize this, but under the buyer agency agreement, you have to write down the actual commission. Even though in the listing or on the MLS, it says that there is a commission, but you have to write the actual commission you want to be entitled in the buyer agency agreement.
Well,
If you don't, and the seller doesn't pay you for any reason, or the agent doesn't pay you, then you have nothing.
Of course.
If you write that, then you could go after the buyer also and tell the buyer, this is what happened, this is the situation under this agreement, this is what I'm entitled to. So why don't we work out a deal? At least you have some leverage. But the mistake that most agents, they do, they put zero.
well, here's what happened. This agent from another competitor lost $25,000. And here's how they lost it. I get a call, a friend of mine who happens to be the manager of this other place, and he calls me up and he's really thrilled that now all of a sudden he's going to nail one of my agents. He says, Jack, he says, you might as well tell your agent to write the check for $25,000. I finally got you, and you better tell the agent to write you the check. I said, well, do you mind if I just speak to the agent and find out what's happened? I said, and by the way, do you have your buyer representation agreement? Can you send me a copy? And he said, I don't have it, but I'll read it, I'll send it to you. Well, I get a call not too long after in the afternoon. He says, okay, take back what I said. You know what my agent did? On page 2, what Arash is saying, they didn't fill in the commission. He said, so your guy just earned $25,000. If the 2.5% was in there, we would have gone to arbitration and our agent here would have lost at $25,000 because they clearly had a good agreement. And he sent me a copy of it. So I called the agent and I said, guess what? You just got off the hook with a $25,000 commission. So fill it out, because if you don't have it in there, you're not entitled.
Why would they do zero?
That's a mistake most people do.
Yeah, they don't.
Because what they do, the
Somebody might wanna
client,
sign
you
it
see,
for
this is where it comes down to you educating the purchaser. You have to explain, it clearly states in that agreement, under that commission section, it said, if for any reason the agent cannot recover the commission from the other side, the buyer
Yeah, you
will
have to
pay
tell
for
Okay,
it.
but some agent that offer you 1%.
Doesn't matter what they offer.
The 2.5%.
You get it signed.
Nobody will collect the rest of that from the buyer.
It's a protection.
Even,
It's a
even, okay,
protection.
if you get 3%, do you pay 0.5% to buyer? No.
No, that's your minimum.
No, this is the
2.5%.
protection for
They don't
you.
say any minimum, they say you, that.
You are.
Cheat on
That's
you, you
okay,
receive
but
2.5%.
you are losing, yes. If you sign 2.5 is the commission that you should earn, and they're offering 3%, you will lose that 0.5%.
No,
Will you?
no.
Yeah, if they find out, you lose. They
No,
can
no.
they can sue you.
No, the Mark Wilson was here, I believe, was here, yeah.
No,
They
I think-
can claim it back.
I think there's a step that's not being discussed. You can collect 5% from the listing brokerage, but with your client, you have an agreement at 2.5. You gotta give the difference back to the buyer.
Yeah.
Unless they.
That's
agree.
okay.
Yeah.
I rather give money when I have it and give some of it away than have
And don't
nothing.
put as per MLS,
But the Mark Wilson say no.
That's under the confirmation in the buyer agency. If you write that,
No, they said 2.5, obviously they put on 2.5%, because usually here.
so if you get
2.5%.
more and the buyer
You
wants to
know,
go
in
after
London,
you,
in London, all of the commission is 2% for buyer agent.
doesn't matter. If the buyer finds out that you got paid more
without
and he wants to
agreement.
go after you, he can, and he is entitled for the difference.
And don't put as per MLS listing agreement, because these mere postings, they're $1.
Yeah.
And so that's what you're gonna get. If you put a,
So you need to put up 2.5%, we know, but a lot of agents now they offer 2%, 2.25, some of them, they wanna set
No,
fast. they
where are
offer
you referring?
3%,
Are you referring
4%.
on the listing or the buyer representation? On the buyer representation agreement, if you put 1.5%, that's all you're entitled to collect. If you collect more, you have to give it to the buyer. It's not your money unless they give you permission to work.
You have to disclose. If you don't, and you're gonna get paid more, and they find out, they're gonna come after you.
If you do a deal, a financial deal with Ali, and you get $1,000, let's say, as a referral fee, as you're entitled to, polite, you have to disclose it to your client.
Same thing. Any benefit
It's all
to the
about
agent, you
disclosure.
have to disclose. Very simple. There's not.
And there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
I don't mind making sure that I get the 2.5% and give back even 1% extra to the client.
Your agent may receive 3% for the commission.
Right.
They pay 0.5% to buyer.
Well, they don't, but
They don't.
you should.
They don't pay, they should. And if the buyer find out and go after you,
Yeah.
then you're gonna end up paying it anyway. But this is not about paying back to the client. I think you're missing the point. This is about protecting yourself.
Yeah.
The client is the guy who got the $2 million. Are you worried about the 2%? The guy, he has the $2 million, he's not gonna worry about your 2%. So you're the small guy, so you have to protect all of your, all your
The
angles.
Iranian buyer, they worry about that.
Oh, they could, then that's not the right buyer if he's worried about half the point.
I think you have to worry,
Not Iranian, why you shoot me?
you have to worry about all buyers.
No, I say your buyers.
Why you shoot me?
No, I know means that because you are guys with the buyers.
The Iranians are going at it.
Yes,
Okay,
how do you
that's what I
see
said.
working on lease, commercial lease, as a first step to enter?
Oh, commercial leases are fun and they're easy.
Commercial lease, this is what I can
They're
tell
like
you.
residential.
Don't do it. That's why I joined him in the old brokerage we were. I didn't want to touch on the leasing. When I find out he was specialized on the leasing, every single lease deal he handled, I didn't want to touch it. Because the leasing is the most complex, to me, I think it's the most complex side of the transaction. More complex than the selling an investment, selling even an entire portfolio of $200 million is easier than doing a 50-page lease, because there are so many things. So
We have a specialist.
Even in the residential sector is much more.
residential, it's
Jim
easy.
Kaiser-
I mean, compared to the buyer.
But there's steps you can take to make it easy.
Yeah.
So the first step is the pre-printed form on the web forms is very good. And what you do is you defer to the lawyers. So you either, you make it conditional,
Yeah.
you write it in the agreement that this is conditional upon the lawyers reviewing the building standard please. That's it.
Yeah.
And you defer the 50 pages to the lawyers.
Yeah, you could do a letter of intent
Yeah.
and then have the lawyer do the lease. Don't ever draft it. I always have the
So we're
lawyer.
gonna take a few minutes and do, Ida, if you have anything to declare as far as, not customs, haves and wants?
I have a garage, which is for, it's a sale of business, 300,000, and it's also for lease. So the owner is the same. It's located in the design decor district. He's looking for a good tenant, so we're not in a rush to find just anybody. So it's zoned auto currently. It has many uses. There's 3 licenses there as well, which is the safety standard, the auto mechanic. Now, the building, he might even demise maybe 3,000 square feet if somebody wanted to come in. It's in the design decor district of Toronto, City of Toronto, between Castlefield and Eglinton, where the new LRT is. So I have that, I have a brochure, if someone wants it, I will give it to you. And that's all, I also have a buyer who buys freestanding buildings, zoned auto, and he's looking currently in the GTA, so if someone has something in their pocket, he's solid, I've done a few deals with him, Jack knows them, they're
Yeah,
reputable.
she's got control of this.
I've got control of the buyer. So, if you come across something, it's gotta be a minimum of 3,000 square feet, minimum 3 bays, a freestanding building. It could be an industrial building that has a drive-in doors that they could also work around.
You have your business card?
I'm looking for it. I'm sorry, I had it in the card.
You should have answered, don't you know who I am?
Yeah, I've heard that from some agents.
It's just
I
a
did
sale of
mention the name of
business
the guy.
asset. Now,
Special
the
ed-
He works with
building
us now, he's
is
with
for
Connect.
sale. In the
I think it's the
event-
same guy.
Samsung.
I can look it up, yeah.
I mentioned the email, that's the guy.
I think it's with our, one guy that I asked about is with our Connect office as well. He does specializes in dog sales, which does logistics.
Yeah, I've got those numbers, like if you have somebody that's serious, talk to me about it. I am related to the seller. He is my cousin, this is my godfather's shop. They have 40 years of goodwill, so I'm one of their clients, people still go.
Great, anybody else have anything?
Excuse me, Jeff. Quick question from panel.
Okay.
In commercial, are the subleases allowed?
Yes.
They are.
With landlord's consent.
If there is a clause in the
Tenants should be
lease
on the.
that it allows the sublease, usually they're allowed, but you need to get a consent from the landlord, and the landlord has to be satisfied
The financial.
with the financial and the covenant of the new tenant.
Why charge?
And usually the tenant should be on the agreement and responsible for any check written, yeah.
You could get a
Usually do
release.
that, because I have.
It depends.
It depends, there is no.
Again, there's no
Usual
standard.
ways, so.
It depends who you're representing.
Any other haves and wants?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, please.
Okay, I have a buyer, he's looking for a building of 2 or 3 story, to build, for a college. Between 10,000, 20,000 square foot, but to be close to subway, starting from North York to.
Are they
What kind
operating?
of college, what is the license?
Hygiene, dental college.
Dental hygiene.
Does he have a college right now?
Yes, he has one, and he wants to move to downtown.
But usually they have a license, and license is exactly should be
He
in some.
has, yeah,
They can
he
move
has
the license.
Yeah.
They can apply and move the law.
What's his budget?
Sorry?
What's the budget?
Open. Open.
So
So he-
so just to give you some feedback, I won't work on that. Because open means they're not really serious. What
No,
do
no,
their
no, he
financials
is.
look like?
He
How
is.
much down payment does he have? Remember all those things that we spoke about? So you have to ask him, so how much down payment do you have to buy?
You know,
Because then he'll give you-
he has already 2 buildings, one in Scarborough and one he rents.
So is the plan to sell them or keep them?
Yeah, he wants to keep them and.
Buy another one.
How's he gonna come up with the money to buy them?
He has big business.
How much?
How much does he-
1 million,
That doesn't get us anywhere. I don't
No,
think.
you see, you need to find out
You need
how
to
much,
ask him.
because when you talk
Maximum.
about what he wants to be in downtown, especially if they want to own the building, you'll be looking at upwards of $1,000 per square feet. So
Yeah.
a 10,000 square foot building would cost you $15 million, easy.
Yeah, I told him, he told
So-
me it's okay.
He's okay with those numbers?
Yeah,
Okay, if they're okay, then what we suggest is that still the client needs to sign a mandate. What it means to sign a buyer agency with an agent to start spending time on it. Because no one is going to spend time unless they know that if they find something, they can deal with this buyer and they have full control. So that's a discussion you have to have with your client if they are willing to sign a mandate. If they do, then that's something that, it's worth taking a shot at it. If they're not willing to sign a mandate, then there is no point in spending any time.
I signed with him, but I didn't find the building, I signed with him, it's like 6 months ago, but I didn't find something.
What did you sign with him?
It's a
The buyer representation
buyer
group?
representation.
and they expire.
I think it's valid for 6 months.
No, you could get it for more, but if the client willing to sign the mandate, then it's something that we can take a look at it. But because without having the mandate, we're not gonna spend any time. That's just the reality.
Okay, guys, if I may add, I also have a buyer for freestanding buildings, prime locations, mostly up to $5 million. Old gas station across all of Ontario,
I have
specifically old gas stations.
that.
And
does gas
anything
stations
for
these days?
development, subdivisions, mostly no low rise or high rise, but mostly subdivisions, townhomes and stuff like that.
Well, you've got 2 guys over here you can talk about.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm gonna grab this.
I'll call you
And
too.
the gas station.
Yeah.
I'll,
I have a
I'll
gas
send an
station.
email to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that. Thank you, gentlemen. This
Thank
is
you,
always-
Guys, thank you very
Bye,
much.
Thank you.
Excellent.
He wants to sell his business, it's a franchise.
I don't touch franchise or sell of business.
Yeah, we have, he's just giving me a name because we had somebody here a few years ago, actually, his office was over there. For a couple of years, he worked, and he was a specialist in the sale of business. Our suggestion, and I'm sure, I know Ali and Rash both agree, don't touch business sales. Like what you've heard about leasing, leasing is a lot better to make some money on than selling businesses.
Yeah.
You do a lot of, it's like eating soup with a fork. You're always busy and you're always hungry. The fellow that I was referring to, he worked at it for a few years. He had done it for over 40 years. The market has changed so much. Some of these deals are so difficult to sell. They want an arm and a leg, and even if you do enter into a deal, most of them don't close. So there's a couple of guys that specialize in the sale of business. The best thing to do is just refer it. If it's downtown, there's Jack Maniscola from our King Street office, and he can come all the way up to Steeles Avenue and up here as well. If it's especially if it's a restaurant. But if it's something else, I've got a couple of names that I can give you. They're from a different brokerage, but that's how ineffective they are, because no one within our brokerage wants to do them because there's no money in them. And a lot of agents want to try them, but then after they go through the first one, they come back and say, I should have listened to you. So, but you don't have to listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.